Hello YouTube. This video is going to be something a little bit different for me, and something that a lot of you will probably think is just ridiculous, but since I found out that they've been lying to us about something as fundamental as our whole cosmology, the shape of the Earth, it's opened me up to a lot of other quite fringe so-called conspiracies. And one of these is the issue of cryptids. More and more often people are encountering sasquatch, Bigfoots, out in American wilderness areas and over the world. And they're also encountering some much more menacing and strange creatures. One of these being what can only be described by most as a werewolf type beast. Half man, half dog, or dog man as it's being called these days. And you get to looking around on the web, there's a lot of reports of these creatures. A lot. I've found a couple of radio shows which deal with these sort of things, one of them being Sasquatch Chronicles, which is excellent. It's basically eyewitness reports of encounters with Sasquatch. Now, these aren't the gentle giants of the forest that most people have been led to believe, if they actually believe in these things at all. Like, these things scared the living shit out of people. Like, people are often pretty traumatized. And when you look at the big picture, the US government obviously knows about these things, and the military will make a weapon out of anything that they can. And when you think about this in terms of genetic engineering and Agenda 21, keeping people confined to the cities out of these wilderness areas, it starts to get, well, kind of scary. But I'm going to let this interview speak for itself. Check this out.
Break down the zoo for us. When I first started doing this show, it was mainly just witnesses that would come forward. And occasionally I would have a special forces guy contact me if it was some sort of black ops operation that he's a part of, and he was giving me information. They would contact me from burner phones. This is a one-time phone call. I'll contact you. Don't call me back. There was a lady who came forward. I would say she's special forces. She is on the gene side of this. I don't want to say veterinarian. That's not really the right term, but she would talk about being embedded with these special forces guys and going out on these kill team missions. When I talked to some of the special forces guys a year and a half prior, she couldn't have known this. They would say that there's other people embedded in their special forces team. It's not just all Delta Force that goes out. And she was one of these people that were embedded in the team. And as her and I were talking, she said when she first got involved in this, she went to this place called the zoo. And I said, what's the zoo? And she said it's this underground base. And in this underground base, they're playing with DNA. And you'll find half human, half creatures down there. And they call it the zoo. One of the things she said to me was, you know, mermaids are real, right? And I said, mermaids? She goes, yeah, it's not like what you think, though. It's not the Disney characters. These are weird beings that the military has created. And the problem with these, they would die in the wild. So a lot of them they would keep in the laboratory. And she said it's creepy. It's something that gave her nightmares for a long time. And one of the things she said to me was there's a base out there around the Four Corners area, and it's in the mountains. It's still Dulce, I believe that's how you pronounce it. And there's another zoo out there. And sometimes they let these things out. They let them run around because one of the things they found was in the wild, they do better than in the laboratory. And so they'll put a tracker in them and basically let them run free and track them. And so she was telling me, you know, if you run into people who, especially in that area, say they saw something so unbelievable. She goes, you might want to stop to listen to what they have to say, because in those areas, they will absolutely let these abominations run free, which is very disturbing, to be honest with you.
These things are not new. Okay, they've been around for many years. I mean, we're going back to, I'm just going to be bold and say, take it back to the book of Enoch, where there was the fallen angels sinning against the animals.
I just saw on the news the other day, they are growing dinosaurs in chicken eggs through DNA.
Yeah.
Now, if they're letting that out to the public, letting you know, hey, we're growing dinosaurs in chicken eggs, and we were able to do this through DNA manipulation, what are they doing that they haven't shown you? And you know they've done way worse than this. This is just a small taste of it before they come out with some of this stuff. And I honestly think in the next 10, 15 years, this world's going to get strange. This world's going to get really weird really quick. I always tell my son that. It's not going to take too long. You're going to start seeing some weird things come out.
What happened after you guys did the interview? I think this is kind of where it gets a little wild.
Well, she was warned prior to the interview. And I don't know how they were tracking. I'm sure they were listening in on her phone calls, but they found out she was going to come on the show. The set time for our interview was 1 o'clock. And what happened was is she says, while they're here, I'd prefer not to do the interview now. And I said, well, who's there? Is it the Men in Black? And she said, no, it's worse. It's the Men in Blue. And I'm assuming she meant Air Force, because if you ever look at some of these weird topics going on, the Air Force always has their fingers dirty in the bowl. So I was like, well, just call me back after they leave. She calls me back at like midnight. And I'm like half awake when I'm talking to her. And she's like, okay, they left. But they're going to be back tomorrow. They sat around and waited for me to call her. And so she comes on, and they give her a list of things she couldn't talk about. She couldn't talk about DNA manipulation. Now, she had a medical discharge from the military, and they already took her security clearance away from her. But they warned her. Well, she came on the show, and we really didn't go a whole lot into it. I mean, she wasn't giving away anything major, but I think it was 2 days after the interview, she got attacked. She got stabbed 4 times and was left for dead. And it was like a professional hit the way they stabbed her. Luckily, a neighbor found her, took her to the hospital. It should have killed her. It didn't. She's starting to do better now. But, you know, in that whole military group, she worked with a lot of mercenaries. And some of them are close friends who aren't in the military anymore. And they're watching her. They're around her place 24/7. Because you know they're going to come back and finish the job. She sent me all her military documents. I mean, she was legit with what she was telling me.
There have been tests done on Bigfoot DNA, and they have found that the contributing mother was human. This goes right back to the technology we were talking about, which is being utilized in the zoo and these other underground bases where they're merging human DNA. So they'll have like a mother donor, and then they'll merge these other animal DNAs. So what can you tell us about the DNA that they found in the Bigfoot?
Some of the military insiders, what they told me was on some of these other creatures, if they run the DNA, it'll make no sense because they've been mixed with so many different things. They're creating all these different hybrids. She told me that, you know, if you run the DNA on, let's say, a Sasquatch that's been altered or some of these DNA abominations that have been put out, you'll get Neanderthal, you'll get human, you'll get 3 different primates. She said it will make no sense at all when they run the DNA, and I'm kind of leaning towards that's kind of why there's such a cover-up with it. But, you know, I think with Sasquatch, there's a real creature that's out there that's a non-human primate. And I think they've taken from that and created abominations based on it. But I think, you know, when they run the DNA, they'll come back as human. And they think it's contaminated, so they'll throw the sample out. And I think they're making a big mistake there because I think there's a lot of human DNA in some of these things. It's interesting, you know, when you start looking at some of these other things like dogmen, and they're starting to become more and more prevalent. Where's that coming from? And I used to just brush them off, which is kind of stupid because I believe in this 8-9 foot tall ape running around.
Right.
But what I started finding is on these dogman reports are very consistent. People have down to a T what they're seeing. And, one of the things I talked to the military insider about was these dogmen. She goes, Wes, people aren't lying to you. They're not lying to you when they tell you about these dogmen. And I said, well, what are they? And she used that term abomination. I always go back to that. And I had other special forces guys use that term, abomination. She said they're an absolute abomination. They've been created in a lab. And she said, if you ever come across one, just shoot it. Don't think twice, shoot it, because it will kill you. And as I've come across police officers that have seen these dogmen. I mean, I can give you police officer's testimony after police officer testimony. They've seen them. Border Patrol agents that have seen them. Just on and on and on. And if you look at what they're talking about, it's very, very consistent. And so I think the media today, if you really want to know what's going on in the world out there, and I don't mean this to blow your horn or my horn on this thing, but you start listening to some of these podcasts, start listening to some of these guys that, like Justin, that's done research, has looked into this. It's not... You start to uncover some truth on some of these things that you'll never see on Fox News, that you'll never see on CNN, witnesses you'll never hear on Finding Bigfoot. You start to really uncover some things that are going on out there, and it's this alternative media that's bringing it out.